I'd like to start out by recognizing my present husband, John Hennessy. I was lucky on both counts. But, you know, let me first say a word about this bookstore. I don't think I have to exaggerate one bit when I say this is the best bookstore in the state of Vermont. And I don't say this at every bookstore. It really, you know, your presence here tonight also shows the loyalty that people have to the written word on paper. And bookstores like this are only going to survive if we continue to patronize them as you do here tonight. And I confess, I have an iPad, but I still like to hold a book in my hand and feel those pages. So I think the book is going to survive as a result of places like Northshire. Now you might ask, you know, why did I write this book? In fact, I'm being asked recently, and maybe it's because should I say this out loud? Oh, other people print it anyway. I'm 78, and people say, you know, why aren't you just taking it easy? You've been governor, you've done other stuff, and some little flame inside me refuses to go out, that I still want to get engaged and use my voice to foster change. And what I found when I wrote Pearls, Politics, and Power and did a lot of speaking, and I found that I was often asked a question, especially by younger women, how did you do it? You know, you had 4 children, you had a family, you had a full-time career, and you know, there's never an easy answer to that question because it is such a personal thing. The best answer I could give was I did it in stages. My kids don't remember now that I was home for 10 years and actually baked brownies and chocolate chip cookies and all of that good stuff, and I enjoyed those 10 years. But then as my children got older, I got more and more engaged in politics. But what surprises me is, you know, this was a big question even in the 60s. You know, how do we do it? And the women's movement told us, well, you can do it all. But it never paused to add, but maybe not at the same time, and maybe not as easily as we are professing. So in a way, I discovered that this generation is facing the same issues in a slightly different way. Even though we've made tremendous progress from the time when I had young children. You know, women are in the workforce in equal numbers, with men. Women are educated, 60% of undergraduates are female. What we haven't done is we haven't adjusted how society is structured to that revolution that has transformed the family. We're still acting like Norman Rockwell's Saturday Evening Post covers, where the perfect family had daddy going out the door, holding a briefcase, wearing a tie, and mommy sat or stood in the doorway, waving goodbye, wearing a pinafore. Does anybody remember pinafores? Yes. And 2 perfect, of course, white children at each side of her. And that photograph, or that painting, now applies to about 20% of the population, and probably not for a lifetime, probably just for a phase of their lives. And the new family portrait, which has both parents or a single parent walking out the door, is really the new portrait. But we have kind of a sentimental attitude that those days were perfect and that those days should and probably still exist, whereas they don't in the same way as we imagine them to. Well, I'll start out by reading you the beginning of the book. 5 of us were meeting for lunch and reminiscing about the women's movement. "I was never one of those angry women," one said. "I'm still angry," I blurted. My reaction surprised both me and my friends. Where did that come from? A source I hadn't tapped before. Upon reflection, I realized that I'm not angry enough to carry a placard down hot macadam streets in front of the nation's capital. I wrote this before I spoke in Montpelier 2 weeks ago. But I did, as I did in my 30s when I marched for women's rights. But now in my 70s, I'm still dissatisfied with the status quo and harbor a passion for change. Old age allows me the luxury of being impatient. There is not so much time left, and it permits me to say what I think, to be demanding, and best of all, to imagine a different world where there is true gender equality in the workplace, the home, and the political arena. Why the anger? What did I expect? I expected that the women's movement of the 1970s would give me a good answer to the question my students regularly asked. How do you manage to have a family and a career? I expected that affordable quality childcare would be widely available, that paid family leave would be the law, that equal pay for equal work would be a reality. I did not expect that women would still make 77 cents for every dollar that men earn. I expected that 1/3 to 1/2 of our Congress, governors, state legislatures, and mayors would be female. I did not expect that in 2010 that number would be 17% in the Congress, and the United States would be tied at 69th place in the percentage of women in parliaments out of 178 countries. I expected that 1/3 to 1/2 of corporate board members would be women. I did not expect to see that proportion, again, stuck at 17%. I expected that a high percentage of the Fortune 500 companies would be led by women. I did not expect that figure to be 3%. I expected that misogyny, rape, and other acts of violence against women would be widely condemned and sharply reduced. I did not expect that a female journalist would be sexually abused in the middle of Cairo's Tahrir Square and then blamed for bringing it on herself, as Laura Logan of CBS News experienced in February 2011. I expected that Roe v. Wade would remain the law of the land. I did not expect that it would be eroded state by state. I expected that by the year 2011, grandmothers like myself would be able to tell their grandchildren of how life used to be long ago, when families had to figure out for themselves how to be both wage earners and caregivers. Some changes occurred that I had not expected and could not have imagined. That women would comprise nearly 60% of college undergraduates, that women would comprise half of the medical and law students, that women would enter the workforce in record numbers, and that the traditional family supported by a father would be overtaken by a two-wage earner family. That's the good news. The bad news is that many women who have careers that we never could have imagined for ourselves are still flummoxed by the most age-old problem: how to have a job and take care of the children, the elderly, the sick, and the disabled. Until we find a way to sort out how to share these responsibilities between spouses, partners, employers, and government, gender equality will remain an elusive goal. So that is the search that I undertook to find out both why the United States is so different from the rest of the world and how we can bring about change. And I'm surprised now, the book has only been out about 10 days or 2 weeks, how many people do not know how different we are from the rest of the world. Take, for example, paid maternity leave. The United States, as you know, had the first bill that Bill Clinton signed into law was unpaid family and medical leave. And is considered a huge achievement in the United States.